and welcome to The Final Frontiersman, a YouTube channel about all things Trek and more. As you can see by the layout and everything happening in the opening thus far, this is not a typical Star Trek episode. This is going to be one of our holodeck adventures where we delve into other genres and other things that I am interested in a selfish way, but hopefully exciting for everyone. So today we have another interview, and this is, I just mentioned to him moments ago, an interview I've literally been wanting to do for years, even before this channel started, and I'm so excited to welcome to the channel today Mr. Christian Matzke. Welcome to the channel. Can you please introduce yourself for the audience?
Absolutely. Hi, Bill. My name is Christian, and what I'm probably best known for nowadays is I am working on a multi-year project to create a 1,000-page Necronomicon based on the writings of H.P. Lovecraft. And so Bill has been a very loyal patron for many years. And back in the day, I've done this for a while, but my other passion was making short Lovecraftian film adaptations. And so we might touch on that a little bit too.
Oh yeah.
Because my very first film, Nyarlathotep, seemed to really make a lot of people happy.
Oh yeah, including myself. Yes. And I do want to talk about that. And since you did bring it up already, that was the Nyarlathotep. That was basically how I learned of you. That was the first work of yours. Even before I knew anything about it, I saw advertise that short film. I thought, anyway, if you're not familiar with H.P. Lovecraft and the Cthulhu mythos, this might all sound strange to you, especially the words we're going to be throwing around through this episode. But Nyarlathotep has been like one of the most captivating characters in the entire history of the mythos. So I've been interested in it. And I saw a movie. I'm like, I'm down. I can't wait to see that. I bought one of the DVDs of the film festival where they have all the short films on there, and to this day I still rank that in the top 3 Lovecraft films of all time. I watch it frequently. It is a masterpiece in my opinion. And again, we're talking about the main goal today is to talk about your Necronomicon project. When I finally joined the H.P. Lovecraft Historical Society, one of the first posts I saw was about the Necronomicon project, and I saw your name on it, and I'm like, oh my god, I have to get in on this. If that's the same guy, I have to get in on this, and I have not regretted it since. So I apologize, I'm gushing here, but I'm just, like I said, years of excitement building up, waiting for this moment. But welcome to the channel. What would you like to discuss first while you're here, before we dive into the nitty-gritty?
Well, as I mentioned before we started recording, to tie this to your channel, we at least have to, give mention of the fact that Robert Bloch wrote a couple of original Star Trek episodes, original series.
Yes.
And at least the one that stands out to me, I think it's called What Little Girls Are Made Of.
Oh yeah.
Possibly. The actor Carol something who played Lurch on the Addams Family is this imposing robot, and he's talking about his creators, and he refers to them as the old ones.
Yes.
And that might be the closest we're ever going to get, because Robert Bloch was a good friend of Lovecraft's, wrote some really amazing stories in the Cthulhu mythos. And so decades later, to sneak that in a little bit.
Yeah, I believe, I don't quote me on it because I'm not really 100% solid on my original series lore, but I believe he wrote 3 episodes. He mentioned the great old ones, or the old ones, in 2 of those 3 episodes.
Ooh.
And in I don't think it was the same episode, but also we were talking before on the one Cat's Paw, the Halloweenish episode. At the end, when the aliens are revealed, they look like Yithians from the Lovecraft mythos or the Cthulhu mythos, and just those little details that you get, like you said, when you're hearing it, you're listening. I didn't even know I knew he wrote Cat's Paw, but I didn't know he wrote one of the other episodes, and I just had it playing in the background, and I'm like, oh, this is kind of a spooky-ish episode, and I heard them mention the old ones, and hang on. IMDb open, like, yep, Robert Bloch. Here we go. Yeah.
Yep.
So, are you a Star Trek fan at all? Do you watch any Star Trek?
So, yes, I have been a Star Trek fan in my
Mm.
life. I realized recently there is now more Star Trek that I haven't seen than
Yeah,
I have,
yeah, yeah,
but I was the Next Generation for 100%. That just, it was the right age. It just hit a nerve.
yeah.
And yet, there's something about the original series,
Mm.
especially the original pilot, for
Mm.
whatever reason, has always really appealed to me because there was
Yeah,
more of a sense of um, high adventure almost. We
yeah,
get
yeah.
that quick shot of, it was Captain Pike back then, I think,
Mm.
and he's fighting like this huge giant monster,
Mhm.
or giant, with this sci-fi castle in the background. I'm like, what is this show?
Yeah.
So, and as much as I love Next Generation, that is a much more, you know, uh, diplomats having conversations over Earl
Mm.
Grey tea kind of a thing.
Oh yeah,
And yet, I still love it.
yeah.
And Deep Space Nine worked for me for quite a while until I discovered Babylon 5, and I really got pulled away by Babylon 5.
Many people say that. Many people say that. I've never actually seen Babylon 5, and
Ooh,
I've been
it may be
wanting
too
to.
late. No,
Really?
it may be
Really?
too late. Yeah,
Really?
it's almost like high school level theater. Like you have to kind of squint and
Okay.
pretend that the backgrounds aren't made of cardboard.
Yeah. Hey,
So
I
if
still
you
like Doctor Who, so I mean,
okay, all right.
yeah, I can get
If
into that.
if you can handle old
Yeah.
school Doctor Who,
Yeah.
then you can definitely handle Babylon 5.
Okay,
And it
then
was
maybe.
the first television novel, really. It was 5 years
Mm.
of every episode was planned beforehand.
Yeah.
In there are some twists and turns with actors coming and going,
Mm.
but they pulled it off. And now, when you have things like Breaking Bad or
Mm.
whatnot, and actually Breaking Bad has had multiple Babylon 5 jokes
Oh, really?
written in.
Oh, I
Yep.
wouldn't catch
And
those. Yeah.
no, it was just kind of a funny, like,
Yeah.
really? So clearly, the guy that wrote that show was at least aware that this had been done once before.
Yeah. That's
But
cool.
finally, Star Trek 6, The Undiscovered Country.
Oh yeah.
I love that movie,
Mm.
especially when you learn that because 5 didn't do so well,
Mm.
they gave them so little money for Star Trek 6
Mm.
that they were reusing Next Generation sets. Like
Ah, yeah,
the president of the Federation's office is 10 forward, redressed
yeah.
with the same painting of futuristic France from a previous episode of Star Trek. Like they just, they didn't give them much to go on.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a scrappy film. I don't
No,
know.
but it's a great film though. It's one of the best. I mean,
Yeah.
especially like back then, every even numbered film was
Yep.
going to be a hit. And 6 was amazing. Yeah, like 2, 4, 6. I love them all, but
Yeah.
definitely 2, 4, 6 are in a league of their own. But
Yeah.
oh, that's good. I'm glad you do enjoy some Star Trek here and there. Like there
Oh
has
yeah. Oh
been a
yeah.
lot of new stuff lately, and there's a flavor of Trek for everyone. I mean, there's so many differences. I think, without giving any spoilers, if you have not watched Strange New Worlds yet, I would highly recommend watching that. Particularly, I mean, the whole season, it's only 10 episodes, it's short. Episode 9 of season 1, I think it would be. You will know exactly why I recommended it if you start watching it. So.
I watched it.
Okay.
It's
Oh my
it's
God.
the
Okay.
only
Yeah.
it's the only episode of the
Yeah. Okay.
season or of the whole
Yeah.
show that I've
Yeah.
watched, which is sort of a little bit tragic because a
Yeah.
main character
Yeah.
um, dies, and it's like, oh, whoops, I guess I should
Yeah.
have seen the things that came before.
Yeah.
But what I think you're hinting at
Yeah.
is the other huge passion I have
Mm.
is for the Alien franchise,
Yes, indeed.
and
Yeah.
that episode is a beautiful homage to, surprisingly, Alien 3 of all things. With
Yeah.
you have the camera going from the point of view of I think they're Gorn, right? That's what we
Yes.
have in that.
Yes.
But they're chest bursting.
Yeah, yeah, right. We've never seen that before, but okay.
No, no.
Okay.
I thought that was a lot of fun.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, I'm glad you saw that. I'm glad because yeah, and hopefully time permitting, I do want to dive into aliens and your love for aliens, but especially even time not permitting, we are going to talk about the recent Alien fan film that you made, which is
oh,
amazing. So we have a lot to talk about. So let's jump in. So just a
sure.
little bit of background first before we go into the whole project.
Mhm.
How did you get into Lovecraft? Just briefly, like what grabbed you about it, like it does to so many of us?
So the story that I'll give you the quick version, but I was a junior in high school,
Mm,
and I had a friend who had homemade tattoos
mm,
and heavy metal t-shirts and long hair and whatever. And he said to me one day, "Hey, I think you'd like this guy, Lovecraft." And he hands me this book, and it's the I think it was the Del Rey editions that had like the dripping,
oh yeah,
skeletons with blood and
yeah,
tons
yeah,
of
yeah,
spiders
yeah,
and all these things. And I said, "Oh, okay. Not really my style, but whatever." But I was sitting in the school library reading this, kind of flipping through, and a senior walked by and paused, and he looked at me and said, "Lovecraft, better be careful with that," and then walked off.
Ooh.
And there's nothing that will make you more interested. Like, wait, I'm not supposed to look at this.
Yeah.
And
Oh my.
so I believe it was the Music of Eric Zahn was the first thing that I read,
Oh wow. Okay.
which is such a strange outlier of a story in a
Yeah.
lot of ways. But instantly, it's like, wait a minute, what is going on here?
Yeah.
And you know what? Why does this not ring true? I almost think it must have been my senior year because it was immediately after I graduated from high school.
Mm,
My mom moved to a new town and I hadn't started college yet. So, I moved with her. And so I didn't know anybody, but the town library was walking distance from the house.
mm.
And they had the Arkham House hardcovers with the
Ooh.
dust jackets.
Yeah.
And so I would go down and I would just get one of those out and I'd make myself a pitcher of iced coffee. And all summer I just drank coffee and read Lovecraft.
That sounds like
And
a good summer.
it was a really good summer. And it was one of those things where I part of me was I was anxious to get my arms around the entire Cthulhu mythos. I wanted to
Mm,
understand, and I'd only known about the role playing game
mm,
in that one time my brother and I were in a Walden's books or something,
mm.
and we walked by an end cap display that had all these books, and I thought it said the Call of Cthulhu. I somehow got an extra
Yeah.
syllable in there,
Yeah.
and and I was like, "Oh, wow, that looks scary. I don't want to touch that." So all these little bits come together,
Yeah.
and so I just kept reading and reading, and the more I read, the more I found to read. So
Mm,
after I'd read all of his fiction, I started in on his correspondence,
mm.
the selected letters,
Yeah.
and then find other authors that he was. Well, who are these people he's writing to? Oh, he's writing to this author. Let's read some of his work,
Mm,
and um, just from that, going off to college and then finding other people that also shared what at that time seemed like a very, very niche
mm.
underground thing. Um, and soon after that, discovering that people had actually made adaptations, made feature films or short films, it just opened up this whole world to me.
Yeah, and well, linking into that, like you started making your own films based on
Yes.
Lovecraft, like we said, Nyarlathotep.
Yeah.
What was the reason that why was that your first story? I mean, you said like Music of Eric Zahn, which is a creepy story. I mean, I love that
It
one.
is.
Why did you go towards Nyarlathotep, or was it called to you in a dream?
I think, well, first of all, the first adaptation I ever saw of the music of Eric Zahn is just that's it. There doesn't ever need to be another one. It's so good. It's like, okay, well, that one's off limits. Uh, and actually, I've seen a couple since then, but every story can be adapted different ways. But
Mhm,
no one had touched this little short piece by Lovecraft called Nyarlathotep, and I I saw it as one continuous narration so that I wouldn't have to record dialogue. Luckily, Lovecraft was not big on dialogue
mhm,
anyway. So thinking, okay, well, so I'll take the sound part out. We'll just record the whole narration. And my version is still pretty abridged from what Lovecraft originally
mhm.
wrote. I took out like every third adjective and kind of reduced it down that way.
Yeah.
But it the imagery in it seemed doable. I thought
Mm,
that, first of all, I was a political science major
mm,
with a minor in linguistics, about ready to graduate from college with no, no background in filmmaking whatsoever.
yeah.
And it was only because I found a website that was cataloging all of these short films that people had made with little snippets. And from there, one guy in particular, a filmmaker named Aaron Vanek.
Mm,
He'd done a version of The Outsider that I thought was just amazing. And so we started corresponding, and he was making a film called Return to Innsmouth that was a
mm,
sequel to The Shadow over Innsmouth.
mm,
And so I got involved doing a little bit of prop work and web design for him. And that got me in touch with more of these filmmakers. They're the ones who started the Lovecraft Film Festival that's out in Portland, Oregon every year. And I got kind of drawn into this, but it was, from the get-go, everyone's like, oh, you have to make one, Christian. You've got to make your own film and bring it out to the festival.
mm.
So it was like this wonderfully collaborative, but also peer pressury sort of like, you have to do it. So it took a few years to make the film. Finding actors, I wasn't supposed to be the lead. I wasn't supposed to be doing the narration, all these different things that it just kind of kept getting whittled down until, well, I was available. So I would go do that. And, I even ended up, the lead actor had to leave. The
Oh,
guy who plays Nyarlathotep had to leave. And so there are two shots in the movie where it's actually me uh, under
really?
makeup.
Really?
I can't not see it. So I always think it's funny. And one shot where it's actually my roommate dressed up. So, we did whatever we had to.
Yeah.
Sam Raimi called this shemping. When they were making Evil Dead and actors kept quitting, they would
Yeah.
just slap makeup on somebody else and have them be what they called a shemp.
The
So
jump. That's interesting. And now my next goal when I watch Nyarlathotep, I'm going to see if I could spot which scene is you. I had no idea, but I thought that was your first film. You said
yes, absolutely.
it
With the
is.
exception,
Yeah.
well, my best friend and I in high school had made a film about a bicycle wheel that breaks free and goes on an adventure. But that was, you know,
Slightly
lots
different,
of
different genre.
yep, and got taped over with an episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation.
See, it all comes full
So
circle. See,
it comes full circle. It was
that's terrible.
the
Oh, I'm sorry to
the
hear that.
the one where Worf has to kill Duras or something.
Okay.
Yep,
Yeah. Well,
yep,
if you were going to lose it to an episode Next Generation, that's not a bad one to lose it to. But
right.
that hurts to lose something creative like that. I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, but that was back in the day. I mean, we were using two VCRs,
Yeah.
to kind of to do the whole edit. We didn't have any access. By the time I was in college,
Mm,
we had access to very rudimentary digital filmmaking,
mm,
both cameras and editing. And so I taught myself how to do a lot of the edit. I had some
mm.
help. The score, I had to just call out. There was a guy, his name is Derek Pegritz, but he composes under the name Nyarlathotep.
Oh.
And so, I found him on, I'm sure it wasn't Google back then. I'm sure it
Yeah.
was, Alta Vista or Ask Jeeves, but
Yeah.
I just was looking for music for Nyarlathotep and his music came up. And so I wrote him. And so he did the score. And
Wow.
I've never met the guy is the funny part. It
Yeah.
was, we just, we corresponded and his music was it's a good fit for the themes or the
Yeah.
the mood.
Oh
It's
yeah.
not particularly, it's not a period, piano-y kind of score, but
No,
I was
but
very
it's
happy. I thought,
yeah, the music, well, the whole thing, the atmosphere is perfect. It is spot on. I mean, you hit it right, but the music too. Like you said, it's not the film is done, of course, as a period piece for like those days with Dr. Burke in the late 20s or but the music is just this uneasy like building sensation of something wrong and
yeah.
like with your narration too. I mean, I'm surprised that you weren't your own first choice for the narrator because you have a very good voice for narration and just the soft way that you're speaking in that film too. It's such like going with how uneasy the music is, but then how like reassuring and normal that your narration is that you are a regular person and you are just giving this horrible tell.
Mm.
But then you have that music behind you, like this is not going to end well, and it never does in Lovecraft stories. But
Right.
yeah, I before I forget, and of course the links are going to be down in the description of all the stuff we're talking about today. But if somebody wants to watch the Nyarlathotep short film, where can they find it?
What I would prefer, of course,
Hmm.
is if they go to Arkham Bazaar,
Hmm.
and we'll link I think it's just arkhambazaar.com. They're the people who now run the Lovecraft Film Festival,
Hmm.
and they have released an amazing selection of DVDs and Blu-rays of Lovecraftian short films.
Hmm.
And I think that this is on Classics Volume 1 or Classics Volume 2. I
Hmm.
can't remember, but it'll come right up. And I'm very proud that my film is there, and it's the most. Um, they did a lot of work to clean up the image
Hmm.
and um, give it the best presentation possible for how old the film is. Brian Callahan, in particular,
Hmm.
he and his wife Gwen run the website, but he put in hours and hours, just very painstakingly recreating the credits for me because they were, all I had was a VHS copy by the end.
Yeah.
Um, so I will acknowledge that without my permission, it is available on YouTube.
Hmm.
But if you're at all interested, or if you watch it on YouTube and you're like, man, that was pretty good, I can guarantee you will love this DVD because my film is on it, and then there are a series of other films that I think are just amazing. So it's a good investment.
I will link directly to that DVD down there, which I have on my shelf. I think I bought, I know at least two, but my mind keeps telling me I have a third, but I bought three things specifically to get Nyarlathotep multiple times. Like, I know other stuff's on it too, but I want the cleaner version of it now that's been edited. So I know I have that there, and I have the original. What is it? The H.P. Lovecraft Film Collection Volume One is
From
something
Lurker
like,
Films.
from Lurker
Yeah.
Films. That was the first time I saw it. That
Yeah.
was, and oh my god, yeah, it's just okay. I'll
Well,
link to it. I'll link to it. Don't worry.
okay. But that time, it was paired with Brian Moore's Cool Air,
Oh yeah,
which
yeah.
I just love. I
That's a
love.
great one. Oh my god, yeah.
He is working on a Pickman's model right now.
Oh,
That it's going to probably be another year or so before it's done. But um, he's been putting up images. He commissioned someone to do the paintings. They're actual oil paintings by an
whoa.
incredibly talented artist, and the creature itself, this ghoul, is being realized as a very large puppet, and the detailing is just outstanding. So
I'm excited for that. Yeah, I had no
something to look
idea.
forward to.
Yeah. Oh
Yeah.
my goodness, that is gonna be good. Cause yeah, Cool Air. I mean, that whole DVD, that first volume one, that Cool Air DVD with Nyarlathotep, like everything's a winner on that. I enjoy
Yeah.
going through that DVD. So knowing he's making a new one, oh
Mhm.
yeah, I'm a bit excited. Okay, uh, I want to keep talking about Nyarlathotep, but that is not why I drew you here today, even though, again, that's about 20 years in the making of wanting to discuss that with you. But
Yeah.
to be continued, we need to talk about the Necronomicon. So, for those out there who don't know what the Necronomicon is, can you just briefly say what it is and then introduce this massive and amazing project that you've been working on, please?
Sure. Okay. Lovecraft was one of his gifts, I believe, was in creating the idea of a much larger structure, or he hints at things, and sometimes he even makes contradictory hints because that's more realistic of how a mythology would be laid out.
Mm.
So within that, one of the things that he kind of has as a touchstone on multiple stories is this book called Necronomicon. And he actually wrote out a fictional history: who wrote the book originally, where it was published, where it was banned, what copies still exist, things like that, because Lovecraft's fellow authors wanted to borrow it and use it in stories, and he wanted to continue or have sort of a continuity throughout all these stories, which is kind of funny because Clark Ashton Smith wasn't always keen on doing that and would, make some weird additions, but that's okay. Um, but the book itself doesn't exist, with the exception of a couple of short passages and one, say, full page passage
Mm.
over the course of all of these different stories. But even before Lovecraft had died, people were making fake um, card catalog entries in
Oh.
libraries for the Necronomicon. And if anyone wrote to him and asked if the book was real, he would immediately fess up and say, no, 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 it's just something that I made up, which is actually, this predates Lovecraft. A lot of authors have made up books to kind of flesh out their stories or, you know, just for the fun of it. But this one really caught on. And I think that part of it is while Lovecraft was putting it in his own stories, he was ghostwriting stories for other people, so that it would be a story by him under that would be printed under their name in Weird Tales magazine. That's where most of this was happening.
Mm.
And so, if you're a reader of Weird Tales, you'll see that Lovecraft references it, Clark Ashton Smith references it, Robert E. Howard does, and then three or four more obscure names of authors who actually were having their stories written by Lovecraft will also mention this book.
Mm.
And so at that point, this is decades and decades before an internet. Um, all you can do is assume, well, if all these people are talking about it, it must be real, right? So I think it really caught on and captured people's imagination as this idea of even the name Necronomicon. It sounds bad, right?
Oh yeah.
It sounds evil, and uh, we know now better. Lovecraft thought he knew Greek better than he actually did. He said that Necronomicon came to him in a dream,
Mm.
and that he translated it to mean an image of the law of the dead.
Mm.
And that's not good Greek. That's not how that works. It really would mean, like, there is a famous book called Astronomicon, the
Mm.
book of stars.
Yeah.
And similarly, Necronomicon is, the book of the dead.
Mm.
But um, Andrew Lehman from the H.P. Lovecraft Historical Society has actually done an interesting piece about this, about how it actually, if you're going back to the original Greek and not the original Greek, excuse me, the original Arabic before the Greek, because this is originally the work of a mystic from Yemen in the 8th century, according to Lovecraft, that the word may better be translated as "song of the dead," which I
Mm.
think is
Mm.
very poetic.
Yeah.
So anyway, and so this book doesn't really exist, but over the decades since Lovecraft passed, a number of people have made their own versions, published them either with their name on it, saying "I am writing this book. Here you go." Or sometimes books will be published as the Necronomicon and put out there as though it truly is the book, you know. And that's a selling point for some versions, but none of them have done what I thought Lovecraft was trying to do.
Mm.
And some of them are just like, okay, you used the title, but you clearly didn't
Yeah.
read any of these stories, including in the Evil Dead movies. The Necronomicon Ex Mortis is what they call it in the movies, and it has nothing to do with Lovecraft. It's very interesting and a lot of fun in a kind of a schlocky, heavy metal kind of way, but it's not what Lovecraft was doing.
Yeah.
And I can tell you, I've had a couple patrons join and then immediately um, discontinue because I'm not doing that book, and they were
Ah.
expecting, crazy, I'll swallow your soul kind of monster stuff. I'm like,
Yeah.
that's fine, and there's versions that are out there just for them. But what I'm trying to do is I've again I reread all of Lovecraft's work, and I was noticing there's a heck of a lot of professors from Miskatonic University, in particular, his fictional school, who clearly have read this book and they have not gone insane. Right?
Mm.
The book does not drive you insane, but what happens is if you read this book and then you see something that's outside of normal experience, that's touching on this mythos that he's created, those memories come back, and now what had been a weird book that you read in the library is revealing itself to be the truth of what you have just witnessed, and that's what can cause a mind-shattering moment, sort of a thing.
Yeah.
So that's I'm trying to what I am doing. Just actually, let's start with the basics here. I am doing a multi-year it's almost like you call it, it's a paid membership, right?
Mm.
Each person who joins this Patreon each month will get 8 pages of the Necronomicon. They're aged. They are presented as though they're from a 16th century Elizabethan English tome, And so I very carefully matched the style and the layout, the way that the writing was done, the way that the pictures were done, all that, to make as close or as authentic as possible a version of specifically the John Dee translation of the
Mm.
Necronomicon that Lovecraft specifies. So a lot of research has gone into just that aspect of it. As they didn't use they didn't lay out pages quite the way that we do. They had there were certain aspects of it that seemed weirdly redundant, like the first two words of the following page exist on the bottom. It's called a catchphrase,
Mm.
and it was for putting the pages together so you didn't get them out of order. But it looks kind of funny. You're reading along and there's these two extra words, and you turn the page and it's the same two words at the top of the page,
Yeah.
things like that. But they're important, and it's those details that by putting those in there, it aligns it with actual examples of books from that time period.
Mm.
Similarly, I had to, when I'm looking at the things that Lovecraft was writing about, I had to be very careful if he's referencing something that wouldn't have been known in the 16th century,
Mhm.
then we have to find a workaround, right? So,
Mm.
for example, in Lovecraft's story, The Whisperer in Darkness, there are these creatures that are called the Migo, and they're aliens from another planet. They use Pluto as sort of a base of operations, but they come to Earth. But Migo it's either a Tibetan or a Nepalese word. It's what the abominable snowman supposedly was called by people from that
Oh.
region. So 16th century English speakers don't have contact with that yet, so
Mm.
we can't call them the Migo. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Little things like that, where keeping the internal consistency so that in the future they'll be called amigo by other people, but at this point, and luckily within that story, these creatures themselves want to be referred to as the outer ones. So
Mm.
okay, perfect, we'll call them the outer ones here. But it's that kind of really, really nitty gritty detail that I'm kind of priding myself on doing that sort of research.
Yeah.
And so, for example, a mistake that I made, one section of the book is about the ghouls that we'd
Mm.
mentioned from Pickman's model, and I'm spelling it Ghoul, right?
Mm.
That's how we spell ghoul. Wrong. That spelling comes from the Dutch, which is a funny thing with
Mm.
Lovecraft. Centuries later, while the word itself is Arabic,
Mm.
the spelling with the H was actually borrowed because it made it match the word ghost with a
Oh,
GH. So
interesting. Interesting.
in my
Yeah.
Necronomicon, it should be spelled Gul.
Yes.
That's, and I messed that up. So I'm
Don't.
not going to start over
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Please don't. Please don't. No. Well, don't beat yourself up over that. Honestly, the level of detail that's gone into this, and I would like, if you don't mind, to just give a little more information on how your research goes, because I think, even before you started, I saw an interview with you on a DVD from an old convention, like probably late 90s, early 2000s, where you're saying that you're considering, like, you're starting research to do the Necronomicon, and that was like well over a decade before you actually started. But the fact that even, as you mentioned, like going back through the stories, like sometimes they'll mention what page something appears on in Lovecraft story. They'll say in the Necronomicon, on this page this happened. You said that you are aiming to make sure when you get to that page, as
Mhm.
they come up as you're going through, it's going to match what's there. So what is your research like on this? How do you prepare for something like that?
So, ironically, you've totally jogged my memory. I think I know what documentary that was. I think I was actually sitting on the steps
Yes, yes,
at
that's it.
the
That's
okay,
it.
that's at
That's it.
the Hollywood Theater out in Portland, Oregon, and oh, that's great. I got to rewatch that.
It's a
But
good one. It's a great one, yeah.
I started making art first,
Mm-hmm.
in part because I made a short film called Experiment 17.
Mm.
That's a pseudo documentary about, if Lovecraft specified that the Necronomicon was held in certain libraries around the world, and one of them was in the Bibliothèque Nationale. I thought, well, okay, what happened during World War II? The Germans invaded France, and we know that the Nazis were really obsessed with the occult.
Mm.
In popular fiction, we have a little bit Indiana Jones and Hellboy and things like that, but
Yeah.
they truly did have this sort of strange interest. And so I thought, well, if we're going to have that happen in a Lovecraftian universe, then the Necronomicon would definitely be there, and they definitely would try to get their hands on it. So it's just a little documentary that is also on YouTube of this German officer trying to read from the Necronomicon, and it goes poorly for him, which is great. But I wanted to have a woodcut. I wanted to show, one page of the Necronomicon, and so I made a piece of art, and just because that's what I needed, and that started all of this, quite honestly. And I used that piece of art in the book about a year ago, and I was so happy to do it
Mm.
because it was finally coming home to the book where the whole thing had come from. I had to write the book to get to it, but
Yeah.
um, and then I did a sequel to that called Experiment 18.
Mm.
Did another woodcut for that piece that also has appeared in the book. And then finally, we did a prequel to the Dunwich Horror,
Mm.
and that used a good number of woodcuts that I had made at that point. So, making the movies led to making the art, and making the art then led to making the book,
Very
if
cool.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
I kind of was hoping that someone would do this for me, like someone would write it and I could illustrate it, I guess. And I waited and it didn't happen. And so I just one day I said to myself, I can remember I talked to my wife about it. Like, I know this probably sounds crazy, but do you think people would go for this? And the amazing thing, Bill, is that you at least knew my work previously,
Mm.
but I have a couple of patrons that joined the very first month. I've never met them. I've had very little actual contact with them, but the I put this out there and they joined and they've been with me the whole way through.
Wow. Wow.
And the only thing that makes sense to me about this is I'm charging $12 for domestic within the US and 15 for foreign a month. And so you give me $12 and I give you 8 pages of the Necronomicon.
Mm.
If you get them and you don't like them, you cancel and all you're out is $12,
Mm.
versus if I did a Kickstarter where I
Yeah.
want you to give me $100 or $500 or whatever. And so then I have all that money and I run away. or you finally get what I made and you're like, this isn't what I wanted. So I feel like there's kind of a low threshold of risk.
Yeah.
Um, it's ideally.
That definitely appealed to me. I like, if it's not what I'm expecting, like you said, it's only $12. Well, in my case, $15. I can test it out. But you also, like, now you've been going on for how many years now? It's fourth year now, fifth year.
I think 5.
We're in
Yeah.
the fifth year now. You and I know, because every now and then I like to throw some of this on social media, try to like get some other people like saying like, hey, this exists out there. Especially when somebody brings up one of the weird Necronomicons with gibberish that's in there, and like, hey, I'm selling that, and like, you could buy that, or you could try this, so a lot of people think like, well, it's been going on for a long time, I missed all the beginning. You do offer, people can catch
Yes.
up, and like I
Yes.
had to do, I joined in the second year, so I missed the whole first year, but
Right.
you allowed me to catch up at my pace, which was so generous.
Oh, exactly. And because, ideally this book would be printed on a printing press. That would be the most wonderful way to do it. But it would also mean that it would be an extremely limited run and it would be way more expensive. The way that we're doing it, we are using modern printing technology,
Mm-hmm.
but it means that at any point I can catch people up. It's the same rate. You pay your 12 or your $15 for 8 pages, or a larger grouping of pages. The project is not cheap on
Mm-hmm.
in the long run, and I recognize that. But I, you know, it's a hell of a lot of work to make this all happen.
Yeah.
And again, I don't know why I just thought, oh, I know, I'll do this and I'll do this and I'll do this. And so, for example,
Mm-hmm.
it occurred to me, I was reading the Dunwich Horror, and there's a passage where the main antagonist, Wilbur Whately, he's passed away, and the bigger threat is looming, and characters find his diary and they translate it, and so it's the diary of this young cultist, and he mentions doing the a certain kind of ritual and not liking it because what came forward was it was answerable to the ground and not from the air.
Mm.
And that's all that's said about that. And I thought, the ground, but not the air. And in that story, in the Dunwich Horror, there's this concept. Sadly, this is a term Lovecraft loves to use, the old ones, like we
Mm.
talked about earlier. He refers to multiple different groups of entities as the old ones or the great old ones. But in particular, in this story, it's a very specific group. The old ones exist just outside our dimension. They used to rule the earth. They want to rule again. You can know them by their smell or by the children that they have spawned with humans. And that he specifically says Cthulhu is their cousin, but can only spy them dimly. And so they're
Mm.
separate from Cthulhu and the Great Old Ones. So it's a
Mm.
separate thing. And they're in the air. They are of the air. Okay. So I thought, all right, if that's answerable to the air, then he's talking about the old ones. Then what's answerable to the ground? And of course, in Lovecraft stories, there are all sorts of underground things going on. While he didn't believe in a hollow earth, he thought it was kind of fun to play around with there being these multiple tiers of civilizations beneath us, or all these different creatures, ghouls, for example, that live underground. And once I had those two, like, okay, well, because the old ones from the Dunwich Horror, specifically page 751 in the Necronomicon, is this incantation to open the gates to Yog-Sothoth and all these things.
Mm.
So, all right, if I'm thinking of this book, that puts the old ones towards the back because that's where 751 will be.
Mm.
And so then I have those from underground. Okay, that's one grouping. And then, of course, I'm going to have the deep ones and things like that. So that's the ocean.
Yeah.
So then all that left for me, I'm just kind of compartmentalizing
Yeah.
the book. Like, then there's all the things from outer space, right? So many alien races in Lovecraft stories. And so because we're using archaic terminology, we'll call it the aether. Okay. So then suddenly my book is or the codex, the entire book can be separated into 4 individual books. One, those from underground, those from the ocean or the, under the sea, that kind of a thing. And we're working toward finally the old ones,
Yeah.
right? And so, as you know, as a patron, we're now into book 3. We're now
Yes.
dealing with those from the aether. And so this is going to be kind of fun getting into not just the Migo, but some of the other species that filter down. But separating the book up that way, it just occurred to me. That was just how, it seemed logical, and it allowed me to start placing different passages that people had written for the Necronomicon. Like
Mm.
there's a passage from Lovecraft from a story called the Festival,
Mm.
and in that we're talking about things that are underground and things that take on human form. The worms that have learned to walk but ought to crawl, all this sort of stuff. And so that got to go in the first section of the book,
Yeah.
right? And actually, while I'm on that topic, that and the Dunwich Horror are the 2 largest pieces of text that Lovecraft wrote. But
Oh.
the one in the Festival has a weirdly the tone of the narrator is as being not liking what he's talking about. He's scared of these things,
Mm.
and he quotes someone named Ibn Shakabak, although it's miswritten as Ibn Shakabo. But anyway, Lovecraft miswrite. Well, yeah, Lovecraft miswrites it as Ibn Shakabo, but I'll get to that anyway. As saying, happy is something like happy is every village whose wizards are reduced to ashes. But
Mm.
so it has an um, almost as though the person writing it is against this stuff, is cataloging the horrors, right? But when you get to the Dunwich Horror, written a decade later, it is very much from the point of view of someone who's a true believer, who is excited about the
Mm.
coming of the old ones, and is so excited that they have to say "Ya Shub Nugorath" in the middle of a paragraph, right? And in Lovecraft's description of the history of the Necronomicon, he makes it clear that Abdul al-Hazred, this author, worships Cthulhu and Yog-Sothoth. So what's interesting is that previous people who have tried this will make this character of Abdul scared of these monsters, scared of the things that he had writing down,
Mm.
which aligns with that early story by Lovecraft, but not by the later things.
Mm.
And I think that I think the the usefulness of that for some authors is if the character who's writing this is scared, then they get to use all of those, I was horrified, it was so terrifying, that kind of
Yeah.
language. And where I'm writing from the true believer's point of view, it gets tricky because he's not scared of these things. These things may still be sanity blasting or, you know, horrible to behold, but that's awe-inspiring. That's almost religious ecstasy for
Mm.
this character. And so it takes a little bit of work to make the story still unsettling. It'll
Mm.
never be horrific the way that it would be if he were writing down the scary things that he's seeing,
Yeah.
you know? So that was a whole bunch.
No, that was cool because I saw, like, I know on Patreon you'll upload some posts, and you'll have some like text posts like explaining some of the things there. So it might have been there, or it might have been on the Facebook group, but I recall you mentioning how you were breaking it up with like the ground, and then especially when the pages started going into the deep ones, and that how you said like the next part's the sea, and now we're already on book 3. um but I never knew why, and it's interesting that you backtracked from finding like, okay, well, I know the book is this long, I know the
Right.
old ones are mentioned here, which means they're building up to that point. So the way you have it broken down, it makes, oddly enough, something you can't really say for a lot of stuff in Cthulhu mythos. Like, it's logical, it makes sense how you have it organized. Yeah, it would start from the more almost human-ish
Yes.
type of oddities and monstrosities, and get progressively more unknown and different from what we expect. So that is very cool. I am learning so much about this. I am thrilled. You mentioned about like the woodcuts and the images. I want to ask
Yeah.
you about that as well. I mean, there's so much. I know there's no time to ask you all the questions I want to, but the images are really good, and I'm not an expert on any of this at all, but one of my good friends here in Japan, who also provides a lot of the original music for this channel, he is very much into witchcraft and magic, and he has this vast library of all these things. And I was showing him the pages from Necronomicon, and he said there's a number of them he recognizes, like the source
Mhm.
from his own studies of where these images come from, but of course they are adapted. And so it's like a homage to these. Probably if you're into magic and you're into the occult, you would
Right.
recognize these kind of images, but adapted into a Cthulhu mythos version of them. So where do you get that from? Because that must take a vast amount of knowledge or research for that level of detail.
Yes. It is a lot of work. I do Some of them are hand drawn. A lot of them, I will take an existing period example, 16th century or late 15th century. And then what I used to do was I'd photocopy it and I'd white out the parts I didn't want
Mm.
and photocopy it again and then draw in the parts. And these days I'm doing a lot more photoshopping, of course. But to keep the authenticity of that style, it's very much trying to. Well, that's another thing that's kind of fun is that um, nowadays, if you're a fan of Lovecraft, between the role playing games and different art books and different movies, there's so many different versions of these creatures that you can
Mm.
go and see and excite your imagination. But sometimes it's fun with a woodcut to actually reverse it a little bit, make it a little harder. Like, wait, what am I looking at? Or have woodcuts are sometimes beautifully naive, and so what ought to be this incredibly horrific monster, it's a monster, and it matches the description that Lovecraft gives or something. But um, right now, I'm doing a lot of artwork of Migo, for example, and it's really fun because, of course, the Migo in the story, they take people's brains and they put them in a brain canister, and of course, what's a canister? What are you talking about? Like it's a very sci-fi concept that I now have to reduce down to what would a somebody carving this woodcut ideally. Okay, that's another thing we got to talk about is how this book comes to be within the fiction of this whole story.
Mm.
But because John D. Lovecraft says John D. translated the book but John Dee was a devout Christian and would never have wanted this book to be published.
Mm.
So his I'm sorry, I know we're talking about the art, but anyway, John Dee's library was while he was out of the country, it was just pillaged. People came and took I think a full like 2/3 of the books. He had a
Oh
very
wow.
large, wonderful collection, and it all got taken away. And so my theory for this is that, in particular, in a story by Lovecraft called "The Silver Key," Lovecraft introduces a character. He has a reoccurring character named Randolph Carter, who's
Mm.
sort of a his adventuring type
Yeah.
of character. But Randolph refers to Sir Randolph Carter, who practiced magic in the time of Queen Elizabeth.
Mm.
Well, that's John Dee's time. So great. Okay, we have Sir Randolph Carter in that time period. And when you look at the Carter family, with the exception of the contemporary Randolph Carter in the 1920s, every previous one, they were up to no good. These were these were like Salem witchcraft kind of folk.
Yeah.
And even Randolph Carter, when we meet him, is not in the best company, right? Harley Warren has taken
Mm.
him down a bad path,
Oh yeah.
and he kind of redeems himself. So Sir Randolph Carter is 100% a Cthulhu cultist in my version. And so he has taken this private manuscript that John Dee had translated and is now publishing it for this cult called the Order of the Crimson Altar.
Mm.
And so it's a limited run and it's just for the members. And so the artwork would have been produced probably within that cult. So people who they believe in this stuff, but they, you're carving from memory like someone would be drawing from memory. So the artwork, to the best of their ability, is going to show what these different things are. But you know, it's still, like I
Yeah.
said, it's woodcuts reduce things down in a really fascinating way.
Yeah.
So I hope that that's appreciated.
Oh my god, yeah, it certainly is. And just hearing the backstory of, I didn't even know there was a backstory to the images, and now get that it makes it like I don't often have a lot of time for reading, so I am falling behind and catching up with it. But I
Mhm.
flip through it and look at those images constantly, and like just for inspiration. But now seeing the backstory of it, that's good. But also, I do want to mention one other thing. I love this little history of like it's stolen by Sir Randolph Carter and it's published through the call. I love the little margin notes that you have from
Yes.
various characters commenting on the different passages. So it's almost like it's who it's handed down to, from time to time, adds their own little comments and footnotes on the topics. Like where did that come from? Is that like a common thing from back then?
It is, and it would have actually been part of the publishing process.
Hmm.
So, whenever you see the triangle, which is the Greek symbol for the letter D, that's John Dee. So this would
Hmm.
have been a note that John Dee himself had put in the path in the margin.
Hmm.
And now my my thesis for all of this is that he has translated this book specifically for Queen Elizabeth.
Hmm.
It's for her eyes only. And there's actually, bizarrely, there's a weird amount of historical precedent for that happening. He did spy work for her.
Hmm.
You're not going to believe this, under the code name 007. Okay.
Really?
I can't make it up.
I gotta
And
make a memo of that there. Okay.
that Queen Elizabeth, because her father had started the Protestant Church in England. England was cut off from Europe, right?
Hmm.
Spain, in particular, was still Catholic, was threatening to invade England repeatedly, and so Queen Elizabeth made ties to the Middle East. She made ties with the Arab world,
Hmm.
um, in part because they needed trade partners. They needed to, be sending things back and forth, but also she was able to send weapons to them to fight the Spanish on the other side, like on Morocco or whatnot. So it kept the Spanish from being able to invade England because they were dealing with other things. But it blew up this cultural experience in England of Middle Eastern fabrics and Middle Eastern
Hmm.
food, and that's when suddenly Othello shows up in Shakespeare, right? There had been a very I can't think of his name now, but a very high-ranking Arab dignitary visited England, and 6 months later, Shakespeare has written a play about a high-ranking Arab dignitary, right? Um, Queen Elizabeth's teeth went black because she was eating so much these Turkish candies.
Mm.
So, if ever there was a chance that the Al-Azif, the concept of the Al-Azif, the original title of the Necronomicon, would get to the Queen, it would be through this, especially because she had a handmaid from the Middle East that would help dress her and gave her the latest insight on ladies' fashions or something. Anyway, so I'm playing with all of these little historical details to create this plausibility for why would this guy, of all the people, why would John Dee have translated this book?
Yeah.
Anyway, but back to those notes. So the notes that have the little triangle, that's from John Dee to the Queen, and it will often either explain linguistic notes, why certain words are translated, or he'll express his displeasure with whatever awful occult thing is happening in the book at that moment. And then the other notes are signed RC, so that's Sir Randolph Carter, and sometimes he will gently correct Dr. D if he has a bad reading of the situation, or just adding more value, but from the point of view again of a true believer. This is the devout cultist giving you a little more insight of even where, if a certain when there's a certain spell, sometimes he'll note whether or not his cult, the Order of the Crimson Altar, has successfully used this spell. Just little things like that.
Yeah.
So.
No, that's very cool, and I hope people who are watching this, like listening to this detail, like I just keep repeating how fascinated I am by all the little minutia that goes into it, that fleshes it out. Like we've mentioned, there are multiple Necronomicons out there that people are making. You could get a prop Necronomicon for your Call of Cthulhu games. You could get like a fake magic book of spells. You could get one that's written in like just wingdings on the keyboard where it makes no sense at all, but some cool scary pictures. But if you want a book that actually feels like this would be the actual text, the type of text, and with all this amazing detail that you have baked into every aspect of it, it's not AI art, it's not like AI generated text. This is so detailed and pulled from all of the original sources. Like if you wanted something that is actually going to be as close to what Lovecraft, the mythos, would have the Necronomicon be, I don't think anything else comes close to what you are doing. How many more years are left on the project? Like right now, I believe with the mailing that arrived yesterday, as I was preparing for this video, I got that great envelope that I look forward to every month. That nice manila envelope shows up. 576 pages.
That's right.
Because that completed what, the 12th choir?
Yes, I think it was the 12th or the 13th. I gotta double check that, but yeah, that's another thing. Just quick to mention is that, like, when I start each choir, each gathering, I'm giving you the first 4 pages of the beginning, and then the last 4 pages. But each choir is a 48-page chunk, right? So you have a little at the beginning and a little at the end, and then each month for 6 months we build until you have the full 48 pages. And I love that everyone was okay with this. Like, yep, we're gonna accept that there's something happening in the middle until we find out what it is. And I don't think I could write a book in any other genre that would work in, but with the Necronomicon, because it's so idiosyncratic, let's go with. It's so strange that it just kind of works, and I'm able to make these leaps of, I figure out where I'm going to be 48 pages on, and then I work my way back, from forward and back. So it's a little bit like the front section is watching Inception by Christopher Nolan, and the back end is like watching Memento, where it's in the wrong order. But
that's a great way of phrasing it. Yeah, that's good.
There was a point though, you were saying, oh, okay. So Originally I had been planning to go for 840 pages,
Mm.
and then a very kind patron pointed out one more sample, one more place where Lovecraft specifically references something that happens on page 998 of the
Mm.
Necronomicon, something like that. And so I'm going to go for a full thousand,
Mm.
and so we've got another year or so. I think that added an extra year, but it's going to be so worth it because
Oh yeah.
1,000 pages just sounds right, right?
Yeah.
That's the Necronomicon,
Yeah.
um, and we were producing 96 pages a year. So I'm making that happen. And sometimes I'll go back and reread stuff and I don't honestly, I know that I wrote it,
Yeah.
but,
That's
and
how you
every
know.
once in a
That's how you know it's good.
there will be almost like a philosophical concept that will sneak in like, whoa, okay, that was interesting. It allows me kind of, I'm a generally upbeat and happy person,
Yeah.
but this is dark. However you look at it in Lovecraft stories, the world is going to end. It's going to end in a horrible cataclysm of one sort or another. And so to get into that mindset is, you know, it's an interesting place to be writing from, and then come back out and
Yeah.
enjoy my life.
Oh, that's. I'm glad you're able to separate that terrifying fiction from your peaceful, wonderful reality. There. Now,
One,
oh, yeah,
yeah,
please, please.
just a year or so ago,
Mm.
I have two sons, and my youngest son was looking around, and he said, "Papa, are you a cultist?" I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And he starts pointing, and there's a Cthulhu statue in
Yeah.
every room of this house, except for the bathroom. But like, oh dear, maybe I did kind of
Yeah.
go overboard with that a little bit.
What a great question to just suddenly get out of the blue. But well, I mean, you do have a good wardrobe of cultists there. I've seen many pictures, so I mean, you
Oh
can't blame the poor kid for for wondering. But just to be safe, Dad, cultists or no?
Yeah,
Okay.
answer me that.
Yeah.
I learned it by watching you. Yeah.
Hey, there's worse things to get into these days than Cthulhu Mythos called. So I think he's fine right there. Plus, your kids also made an appearance in one of your films a few years
That's
back. I
right.
remember.
Yes, we did one called Tome Alone
Oh, that's it.
that,
Yeah, yeah,
yep, came out of this project. It
yeah.
was, in the film, I'm going off to mail pages of the Necronomicon,
Yes.
and I leave the kids at home, and they get into the book, and they summon a Shoggoth, and then they have to.
As you
That's fun
do.
too.
Yeah.
That's on again, same people. The people that run the Lovecraft Film Festival put that out on one of the last few years discs. So
Yeah, I'm not sure which
just a
one.
fun one.
It's up there. It's up there. Before I go, I definitely want to jump quickly into your Aliens love for that franchise, and
Yes.
also um, definitely want you to talk about your recent fan film in that.
Oh,
So
sure.
so why Aliens? What about that? I mean, you got Lovecraft, now you got Aliens. What is it about Aliens that you love so much?
Let's see. Um, like most people, I saw the second one first. I saw Aliens,
Mm.
and I just, the my dad was the one who showed me Aliens, which was funny because we weren't usually watching that kind of film, but he was ex-military, and so I think that, the colonial Marines in that film kind of
Mm.
resonated with him, and that film just imprinted so strongly on me. Uh, Ghostbusters to a lesser extent, but that
Yeah.
same kind of thing of just, I always look at those two films as being normal people, no superpowers, having to work together to survive some sort of ordeal. And then as I grew up, I recognized that while Aliens is my favorite film ever,
Mm.
Alien is a better movie. It's a more original idea.
Yeah.
And Dan O'Bannon, who wrote that film,
Mm.
huge Lovecraft fan,
Mm.
very much inspired by Lovecraft, went on to do The Resurrected, which is an adaptation of the case of Charles Dexter Ward.
Mm.
So there, some people, have referred to Alien as the most Lovecraftian movie ever made. I think The Thing might actually steal that
I would
title,
go
but
with the thing as well, but yes.
but the idea of cosmic indifference
Mm.
and I don't know, things like that. But I just I love those movies, especially the original three, Alien through Alien 3, as far as presenting a very realistic level of technology, a very accessible world, It's not jumpsuits, it's not teleporters, I'm sorry, but I could see how humans could exist in
Yeah.
space in these environments, even if they end up being a little anachronistic. It's sort
Mm.
of these chunky CRT screens on the Nostromo and things like that. But I love that aesthetic, and yeah, and so I just did 3 years as a co-host on the Perfect Organism Alien Saga podcast, which I highly recommend
Oh yeah.
anyone that wants to do deep dives into any of the Alien movies or video games or things like that. And yeah, that was a fantastic ride. Um, and as part of that, um, I helped make I did the majority of work on a short film set in the Alien universe
Mm.
called Alien Absolution,
Yeah.
where the fun for me was trying to figure out how to use the alien more as a MacGuffin, because the story, it's much more of like a film noir. You
Mm.
have certain tropes of somebody making a judgment, making a bad call, doing something they shouldn't have done, and
Mm.
then the universe kind of punishing them for it. And there's um, all these different aspects of it. But anyway, we even snuck some saxophone into the score to kind of underscore that it was kind of a noir.
Yeah.
And so, although it has facehuggers and aliens and alien eggs and all these different things, they're more representative of how it's about a guy. He's a colonial marshals is what they call.
Mm.
He's a police officer, and he does something that's a little bit illegal to try to make a little money on the side,
Mm.
and that just opens Pandora's box, and everything goes to hell.
Yeah.
And so the alien just sort of represents that. The idea of, if you don't protect Dharma, Dharma will not protect you.
Mm.
You'll be exposed to whatever's out there.
Yeah.
So, but did all the costumes and sets and
It looks
except for the alien.
spot on. It looks spot
Oh
on. The
man.
set design, like it looks as if you walked onto the set of any of the mainline Alien films and you were allowed to record. It was shocking to me how accurate you got the level of detail. And I've seen, like, before you made the film, I saw like the post you were making of you building it and like work in progress, and like, damn, that's looking good. And then the final thing comes out, like, this looks like the real thing. Yeah, your designs are spectacular.
Thank you. My biggest regret, though, is I built a full ceiling and floor in
Mm.
the primary set. You never see it. We never tilted the
Oh
camera down,
no.
or
Oh
but
no.
it helped the actors, I'm
Yeah.
sure. To
Oh yeah. Yeah.
um oh well, oh well.
I wouldn't
That
call
was a
that
lot
a
of fun.
loss, right? I mean, it just adds to the immersion. So
Exactly,
yeah.
exactly.
But
So yeah, still every once in a while, still making short films, and uh, still thinking about if there's in the future
mm,
another Lovecraft adaptation, because
yeah, I wanted to
um,
ask you if you were considering any more.
mostly I need to keep my nose to the grindstone on this book.
Yeah,
But
this is a massive
um,
project. Yeah, I'm sure
it
it
is a
doesn't give
massive
you a lot of
project.
free time with, and I to people out there who, again, you might be interested in this just strictly for the artistic value of
Oh,
this creation. Maybe not in the Lovecraft, but it, like, just the, as Christian's been talking about, like how closely he's been trying to make it accurate to the time, to the period, to the style, to the art. You might be interested in that. Like, if you start, as we said, 1 month, you're down $12 to get 8 pages to see what it's like.
mhm.
If you see the level of detail on this, you can imagine Christian does not have a lot of spare time to start making films, because this has, and with the research you talked about, like, do you even sleep at night? I mean, how do you fit like a normal life into making this thing?
Right. I have to work at it to to separate things out, to try to get 10,000 steps a day, 8 hours of sleep when I can, that kind of stuff. But there's always some part of my brain that is thinking about what's coming next in the story.
Mm.
And also, in a lot of ways, just kind of maybe as a final thought on this, there are little, like, almost a thesis, within each section. I'm
Mm.
presenting my ideas of what I think, what could be extrapolated from what Lovecraft wrote, or
Mm.
sometimes I'm seeing connections between different Lovecraft stories, and playing those out,
Mm.
so that you know uh, I'm in the end, I'm putting my mark on the Cthulhu mythos, but I'm showing my work, I'm showing my sources, and I think that hopefully it'll be appreciated.
Well, I can guarantee I appreciate it. If nobody else mentions it, like you got one person right here. I'm loving it. Like I said, I'm far behind. I need to catch up. I'm the kind of person where if I start to read, I need to make sure I'm guaranteed to have time to read until I want to stop. If I know I have like a set deadline, like a hard deadline, I won't open a book. I won't sit down. So these days, things are going a little crazy here with my schedule. So like that time's getting away from me, but I am sticking with it. I'm going to be there to the end as long as I can. Fingers crossed. I don't want to jinx anything. I'm going to be there to the end. But Christian, again, please, I'm going to put links for everything down below, everything we talked about. So if I forgot to mention where to check out, where to find it as we're speaking, go down below. All the links will be there. Christian, I'll ask you to confirm all that to make sure we got that good. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for coming, and please, like I said, come back. Let's
absolutely will.
Yeah,
it was so good to meet you, Bill.
It was wonderful. Like as I said, years I've been waiting for this. Like 20 years if you go back to Nyarlathotep. I've been waiting for it. Check out Nyarlathotep. Check out the Necronomicon. Check out Alien Absolution. Just check out the stuff that Christian does. I don't think you'll be disappointed. Is there anything else you would like to, before we close out, anything else you would like to direct the viewers to take a look at, or your website? Where should they go from this point forward?
So patreon.com/propping up the mythos is still the best place to see everything. We're working on proppingupthemythos.com. That will be just to have a separate from social media, separate from Patreon, a source for the book project and beyond. So
okay,
it's getting there. It's
getting there.
Web design, man, it's not fun.
yeah, you'd much rather create a 16th century Necronomicon than a modern day website. Now, again, that link will be down there below. Please check it out. And thank you again. I can't say that enough. I hope this is not the only time you appear on the channel. I'm willing to go into the holodeck any day to talk about aliens, talk about Lovecraft, talk about Necronomicon. So it's been a joy to finally speak with you face to face here. So thank you again. And to all the viewers out there, please.
I just have to close with
well, look at that. What does that mean?
Revenge is a dish which is best served cold.
Look at that. We tied it right back into Star Trek again. Oh my god. The only thing my coworker keeps screaming Klingon is from Star Trek 3 about Malt beam them up or beam us up. So yeah, you caught me off guard with that. Perfect. And now I want to go back and stay Klingon again, which I always fail. But awesome. Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you to everyone watching. And just please check out all of Christian's work. Until next time, you know the routine. Probably next time, maybe Star Trek. Who knows? Let's just delve into more stuff. Whatever. But thank you for watching. As always, live long and prosper. Peace and long life. See ya.